the people are debt slaves, and the banking cartel today owns the globe, literally owns the globe. But if you took away their power, to issue the money and charge government's interest merely on paper with numbers on it, you could take away the power for everything else they're doing. The wars, the phony trade agreements, the big highway, the security and prosperity, that garbage that's going on now with the three banditos, Bush and what's his name from Mexico, and our own Harper. There's another politicians. I have to quote you what Cicero said about 2,000 years ago in Rome. He said, politicians are not born, they're excreted. So if you depend on politicians to be honest and to tell the bankers that no, we're going to create our own money, then you're going to wait a long, long time to get control of anything. So Kennedy did that, and for that he was punished severely. And basically the most powerful group that wanted to get rid of him was the Federal Reserve. And Kennedy, of course, instead of just putting out this $322 million, which is like $1, that would be about $1 for every person in the United States now. That's all that's in circulation. That's all they usually did, because they wanted the Fed to do all the rest of the money. They wanted rented money. So they left this amount, what it was in 1878. What foolish nonsense. The money supply can be increased every year depending on the population and the infrastructure that's needed at no cost to anybody. But this is what they did because they wanted the bankers to run things and make money, rent the money for infrastructure, which is absolute idiocy. It's idiocy. So Kennedy, instead of issuing that amount, and they don't like this to be known, he issued $4 billion in that amount of United States notes. $4 billion, not 322 million, but $4 billion. When Lincoln did it, Lincoln issued 450 million of interest-free notes. And he paid for his war with that. He paid off the war, and he kept the Union together. The biggest thing for Lincoln was not the slavery issue. And he said that. He said, with or without freeing the slaves, the Union must stay together, because he knew who was funding the South, the slave economy. He knew who was funding that. And at one point in the war, when Lincoln sent a letter by messenger courier to the Tsar, and it said, this is in the history, of course, as the courier came in to see the Tsar, and the Tsar was told, this message is from Lincoln. The Tsar said, whatever he wants, he can have it. And there were Russian ships around America at the time who would have landed if Lincoln had lost. If they had thought he was going to lose the war, they would have jumped in and helped him. And of course the bankers never forgot this, so they brought about their cozy little Bolshevik revolution, so-called, when Lenin was given money. Wall Street, a very good book by Anthony Sutton, the historian, that you should read. It's called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. He also wrote another one, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. The bankers have funded dictators, wars. They funded all of this because they make money on both sides, and it's not just the money that they're issuing and the billions that are handed over to them. It's the control that the issuing of the money gives them, total control of the globe. So they know who's going to win each war because they fund both sides. So anyway, that was their little Bolshevik revolution, and Lenin had his own special train, and Trotsky came to Canada and tried to get back to Russia on a ship from Halifax, and we arrested him because we knew why he was going over. And of course the revolution, 60 million dead, another windfall for the bankers, because this scheme has to have constant depopulation to work, because this phony financial scheme is like musical chairs, and for every person who can pay their debts, there's 10 others who cannot pay their debts. So this is why depopulation has to continue. So we'll look at it this way. If 98%, well, in Canada it's 98% bank-created money from thin air now. So when you go in and get your loan, and they type these numbers in for which there's no backing, and you give them your collateral, your house, your cars, whatever, when you sign on to do that, where are you going to get, say the interest is 6%, where are you going to get that interest to pay the debt you have just incurred? If all the money created is created from thin air with interest on it by bankers, a private corporation like the Fed, where are you going to get the money, enough interest-free money, to even pay those debts? It's not going to happen. So the United States, starting out as such a great free country, Americans are nothing but debt slaves. They don't even know where their taxes go. I mean, billions go to Israel every year because they're the enforcers in the Middle East, because the wars are about keeping the oil in the Middle East under the ground. Oh, yes. So that driving up the price of oil, as they drove up the price of money. Money did not have a price at one time, but when the bankers discovered that privatizing the money and making people pay interest on it, they could just have a tiny bit of money out there, more control over the people. Now they're doing the same with the Middle East oil. And the reason they want that under the ground is because it's the cheapest and easiest oil to get out of the ground, and if it stays in the ground, the price of oil, the Rothschild cartel, Rothschild, Rockefeller, whatever, that oil cartel and the bank cartel work together. So now they're doing the same thing with the oil. The wars are to keep that oil in there. So privatizing something, you can hold it back, you can let it out. When you do that, and it's a life supply to people, you can create total havoc, which they have done. First with the money, then with the oil. So the first thing that people have to do is to say to these private families, this is it. No more. Governments have the right, and have done so for a long time, of creating their own money interest-free. When money, new money that is created, comes out from government, it shouldn't have interest on it at all. That's why the privatization of the money supply is such a big crime. They charge interest on new money, and they lend it to stupid and corrupt governments who go along with that, and then all our taxes go in interest. 2/3 of Canadian taxes now go to pay interest to private banks. When we have a bank, the Bank of Canada is different than the Fed. Oh, yes. It's publicly owned, but they pretend that it isn't. So now, when we get those loans from our own bank, we get our infrastructure interest-free. But when those loans were handed out to the private banks, 2/3 of Canadians now are paying 2/3 of their taxes. All Canadians are paying 2/3 simply in interest, and so the infrastructure is crumbling. It's crumbling all over the United States. But no one in government will tell the people why. Because they, obeying the private bankers, are taking the people's taxes and they are giving it to the bankers hand over fist for that numbered paper that the bankers lend them for their infrastructure. Governments are so corrupt now, they're only branches of the banking cartel. So, I mean, I could talk about this for hours, and because monetary history tells you the causes.